What's going on, everybody? Former MLB outfielder Austin Jackson here. Look, do me a favor and go check out my man Chris Pome's podcast, 30 Minutes Live with CDP. You can tune in Wednesday and Friday nights on Apple, Google, Anchor FM, and Spotify. And you might even get a special guest appearance from yours truly. Take care.
Hey everybody, welcome to live with CDP here on this Wednesday, August 25th. I'm going to have my guest on in just a minute, Tom McCarthy, the longtime TV voice of the Philadelphia Phillies on NBC Sportsnet in Philadelphia, and also announcer for the NFL on CBS as well. And he also calls some college hoops on Westwood One as well. I'm really excited to have Tom to come on today and talk about his career with the Phillies and then with the NFL on CBS and that. So I really appreciate Tom's time today, and just give you 1 minute, guys, and I will bring on Tom and we'll talk some Phillies baseball and maybe a little NFL as well. So just 1 second, and I'm going to bring on the TV voice of the Philadelphia Phillies, Tom McCarthy. Hi, Tom. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Can you hear and see me okay?
I can hear and see you perfectly. Yeah.
Yes, this technology nowadays in 2022, it's just amazing.
It is incredible. I think that we've learned so much over the last year and a half. Not that we really wanted to, but I think we've kind of been forced to learn a lot. And it's made everybody's life, at least from a COVID standpoint, a little easier to bear, because we're able to do things like this to kind of get information out there and keep our lives kind of rolling a little bit.
I really appreciate you coming on, Tom. And I just started doing this podcast March 2020. And for a while there, I was doing it solo. And I kept working at my podcast. And I've been able to get guys like yourself and Dan Shulman from ESPN and the Blue Jays, and Jerry Howarth. And it's just amazing.
Jerry.
And
I love Jerry.
Jerry is one of the nicest guys, and he's also helping me mentor me a little bit online too, and he's giving me some really good advice. And I could have talked to him for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah, no, he's a good man. Jerry, I've known Jerry since I started. I started in the big leagues in 2001, but prior to that, I was in the Eastern League doing the Trenton Thunder games. So I had done a game up at the Dome, at Sky Dome, as a statistician for Ernie Harwell. For CBS Radio, which is now Westwood One, sort of migrated into Westwood One. And that's when I met Jerry for the first time. It was the night that Charlie O'Brien wore the hockey-style catcher's mask that I got back here for the first time. That's not the one. That's Chris Coates that he wore as a Philly. But, yeah, that was the first time I met Jerry. That was, gosh, it had to be 97, maybe, 96, right around that time.
I was gonna say, and I'm a Tigers fan too, and an Ernie Howell fan, but I'm also a Phillies fan too. I have a Phillies hat.
Nice.
The old school one. So, hey, I was just going to say before I start going questions, the Phillies are sort of my second favorite team, because my late dad in July of '84 took me as a 12-year-old kid to the vet to see the Expos and Pete Rose take on Mike Schmidt and the Phillies. And as a 12-year-old kid, I was in awe of the vet, and I loved the Philly fans. And I even remember the dates, July 27th and 84 and July 29th. It was a Friday and Sunday game, and it was just amazing. And
that's pretty cool.
I wish I had a camera back then, because of all those Hall of Famers that were on both those teams.
Well, that's the amazing thing about, the history of the Phillies, but also you just mentioned the Expos. People don't realize just what kind of an abundance of talent they even had beyond Pete, who just kind of made a cameo, with them, and was able to, set the record, set one of his records with the Expos itself. But yeah, those are some pretty ferocious games between the Phillies and the Expos, when Steve Rogers was on the mound, and Larry Parrish was playing third base, and Tim Wallach was there too for during a time. And I don't know, Ellis Valentine, I used to think, had the greatest throwing arm in the history of throwing arms. And my first professional broadcasting game was actually an Expos affiliate game. I was doing it for the Charleston Rainbows, who were the Padres team. And Cliff Floyd was in that game. Shane Andrews was in that game. So they had some pretty good players.
And yeah, and I wish they had won a World Series. I really hope, Tom, one day Montreal gets a franchise back.
I do too. I do too. I do. I used to love going to. It was the first road trip I ever took as a member of the Phillies was to Montreal, and I remember because Larry Anderson, one of my partners, he bought everything, and that was kind of cool. But I love Montreal as a city, and unfortunately, they weren't drawing well at the end. But I do think that they would draw well now.
I was going to say, and ironically, the team you guys are playing tonight, the Tampa Bay Rays, they remind me a lot about the Montreal Expos. They're great at developing their young players. They're competitive every year, but they're just in my opinion, one of the worst stadiums in baseball, and they just don't have the fan support.
Well, that's the thing. I actually enjoy going to games at the Trop. I don't mind it,
Okay.
just from a dome standpoint. But it is a shame that they don't have a stronger fan base, and I think there are fans there. One of my best friends, Andy Freed, is their radio broadcaster. Andy was my partner in Trenton, and he loves it down there. And it is a shame that they don't have more support. I think the same can be said for the Marlins, but there's so much. I mean, Chris, you and I both know there's so much to do in Florida that it's hard sometimes for your entertainment dollar to be sort of put toward a sporting event. Although the Lightning draw well and the Buccaneers, when they're winning, draw well, and obviously college football does fairly well too. So, I do wish that they had better support. I don't know if a stadium would help. I mean, we see it with the Marlins. They don't draw all that well with a beautiful stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Better when the roof is open than when it's closed. But yeah, I mean, you do hope that one day they are able to draw a little bit better.
And the one other team I'd be concerned about is the Oakland A's too. They're in need of a new stadium as well.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, we all know it's hard to ask taxpayers to pay for these stadiums. I mean, it is, and particularly in this day and age, it's even more difficult. But I always wonder what the A's would be like if they stayed in Philadelphia. Philly had two teams like the Yankees do, and even like Chicago does. I know that would never happen again, but I do think that I would like to see the A's stay in Oakland. I do know that there's other cities that would embrace them. When they do expand, and I do think baseball will expand. I mean, there are cities that are ready to go and welcome teams in.
And I was going to say, I was reading up this years ago. For a couple of years in the 40s, the Phillies kept their name, but they also were called the Philadelphia Blue Jays for a little bit there too.
Yeah, they had there's actually a really sharp jersey where they were they were just trying a different name, and the Blue Jay is on the jersey. It's pretty cool looking. I'm glad they stuck with the Phillies. I'm glad that they have not changed it to another name because as silly as it sounds, people will say, well, what's a Philly? Well, it represents the city, and that's the great thing about it. So I would hope they would never change, and I'm glad they didn't change back then.
Quick thoughts on Cleveland's name change for next year.
I don't mind it. I think like anything else, you have to get used to it. It's like everything else. I was in Cleveland last weekend and went over a couple of the bridges going into downtown, and I had never noticed the Guardian statues before, but I saw them there, and I don't mind it. I really don't. I just think that it's like anything else. You just have to get used to it, and once you get used to it, I think it'll be absolutely fine. It's like it's almost like when a team changes their logo or changes their colors scheme a little bit, like Arizona has and even Tampa has over the years. The A's, I mean, they keep going back and forth for the Kelly green and the I can't remember what the other green would be termed, but I don't mind it. I get it. I understand why it was done, and I just think it just takes time to get used to it. Just like the Washington Football Club. I mean, once they eventually come up with a name, if they deviate from the Washington Football Club or football team, it'll take some time to get used to it. So it's all part of it. You get used to anything.
Well, and this one CFL team here, the Edmonton Eskimos, they're now the Edmonton Elks, but I like their new logo, and they kept their same colors. Green and gold, like the Green Bay Packers, and you're right. Over time, you get used to it and stuff. But I like teams keeping the same colors, ideally.
I do too. I always wonder about that. Like, I mean, I think about the Expos. If a team goes to Montreal, I would assume that they're going to be the Expos. I would assume they'll have the red, white, and blue colors. I would hope they have the powder blue road uniforms like the Phillies have on Thursdays at home.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean. Think about even the Blue Jays when Roy Halladay was pitching for them and they had that sort of futuristic logo.
black
I
jet.
mean,
They had the black jersey, and
yeah.
yeah,
I love their current one, and that's the old one. That's the
yes,
one from Exhibition Stadium.
yes.
But I'm also 53 years old, and there's probably people out there that say that's kind of goofy looking.
Well, I'm 49 and I remember those uniforms. And like you
Yeah.
said, I'm a Tigers fan. I like the Phillies, and I'm also an Eagles fan, and I like old school uniforms. And
Yes.
I really hope the Eagles go back to Kelly green colors. I hope.
I actually like that, and I think I'm probably in a minority with this, but I actually like the Ron Jaworski, Harold Carmichael Eagle uniforms that they used to wear. I mean, look at me, I'm wearing a Prism T-shirt, from the
I
old
remember that. Yep, I remember that.
Prism days. So
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm trying to be in touch with my past a little too much because I want my hair back, but I love the Jaworski, Carmichael, the Bill Berge uniforms, the Willard
Yes.
Montgomery ones. I
Yes.
love those.
I was gonna say, and I'm spoiled being a fan of sports because I grew up in the 70s and 80s listening to Ernie Harwell, Paul Carey in WJR in Detroit, and then I wish we had more internet back then because the times I listened to the late Harry Karras, Chris Wheeler, Andy Wheeler. I'm trying to think who was also on that broadcast.
Yeah, so
Wills.
it was HK, it was
Yeah.
Whitey, Richie Ashburn,
Yes.
Chris Wheeler, Andy Musser.
Mhm.
Those guys were, where I grew up in Jersey. I grew up a Mets fan, so I would listen to, but I was in this sort of triangle of being able to hear, see, and go to all these different stadiums: Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium,
Yep.
and the Vet. And when my dad would take us to all three during the course of the year. And the cool thing was, like, we'd go to the Yankee games and they'd play whoever. The Mets games, they'd play whoever. The Phillies games, we would never go see them play, let's say, the Mets. We'd always see them play somebody outside. It wouldn't be part of that rivalry, which was always kind of cool. But even from a broadcasting standpoint, I could watch the Yankee games, the Mets games, and the Phillies games, all of them, where I lived. I was in such a great area to kind of see and hear all of these different voices.
Yeah, and where I was in Ontario, I obviously had the Blue Jays, the Detroit Tigers radio games, and some of their TV games on Pass Sports, which was Detroit's version of Prism, with the late great George Cal, who actually played for the Philadelphia Athletics at one point, and Al Kaline, who to me is like
what a sweet guy! Al was the sweetest guy in the world. Even up until his passing, I mean, he was sharp as a tack. I'll tell you a quick story about Ernie Harwell. So I was doing the games, doing the stats for Ernie in Toronto that day. My older brother was with me too, so he got a chance to meet him. And at the time, I was doing Princeton football. And back then, there were no computers. And so there was no stat system. There was nothing that you could utilize during the course of a game. So I would tell Ernie that as the guy by himself and a color commentator, I said, I just have trouble sometimes keeping stats up to date, because they wouldn't run you the sheets of paper like they do now, which is so cool. So Ernie took out a yellow legal pad and put a line right down the middle. He goes, all right, Tom, I'm going to show you how to keep stats during the course of a football game. And he said, and he would start, on the left side, that would be where the drive would start for the first team, and go down, 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 just kept saying +2, +2 equals 2, +2 equals 4, +6 equals 10. And then once that drive was over, you'd know how many plays it was. And then you go to the other side of the line, and that would be the other team. So each legal pad, he said, I guarantee you each legal pad would be a quarter. And I'm like, okay. I tried it, and it worked perfectly. So for my last, I did Princeton football for 5 years, then went to Rutgers, but still used the same system. And it was so incredible that it made life so much easier. But he was so great with that kind of stuff. He was so great. But I used to, even in Jersey, I have a transistor radio. I have it here somewhere from when I was a kid that I still have and still works. It's in my office here somewhere. Anyway, that's how I would listen to the games. I would listen to Ernie Harwell. I would listen to Harry Carey. I would get Jack Buck every once in a while.
Cam X in St. Louis.
I'd get, and I would get KDKA out in Pittsburgh. Obviously, I'd get the Philadelphia stations and the New York station. And that to me was one of the coolest things in the world, was just being able to listen to the different voices and just see how everybody did games. And at that point, Chris, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I could be a broadcaster, because you never know what you can do as a kid because you didn't know anybody that did it. So it's like, well, how do I know I can do that? So my dad worked for the phone company. I knew lawyers and doctors and accountants and things like that. So I thought, all right, well, if I'm not going to play baseball, which is what I went to college to do, then I'll be one of those. I'll be a doctor. But listening to those guys, I realized how attached I was to, them calling games and being able to broadcast games.
I was going to say, I've always had a passion for sports back in the 70s and 80s. They didn't have the technology back then, but
no doubt.
But
look at what you're doing now. I mean, think about being, in your 20s or even your teens and wanting to do this.
Yeah.
And the key is to get the microphone on, just to kind of get used to it. And that to me it's such an amazing platform for anybody that wants to get into this business, because you can do it anytime, anywhere. I mean, with the internet, with cellular technology, you can do it anytime, anywhere.
And I'm also with Rutgers TV, which is a major. They're actually the owners of the Blue Jays. They're a major cable company, and I got a taste of broadcasting 2 years ago doing camera work for them. And then the pandemic struck, unfortunately, and I decided I wanted to start my own podcast. And I'm just hoping with being with them, Rutgers TV, as a volunteer, and continuing to do my weekly podcast 2, 3, 4 times a week. Hopefully, somebody one day will give me an opportunity in radio, because I have a passion. I love talking to people like yourself. I love sports, and I like interviewing. I don't even look at it as an interview. It's like I'm talking to somebody I'm friends with, and just asking them questions about their career and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's how I think that's how you have to do it. Now there are times where you'll have sort of cues that you use. All right, I want to talk about this, and this. But a lot of times you don't even use it. Like I have my score sheet, which I'm starting for tonight, and I'll put different notes in it just to kind of cue me. All right, so I'll have Rays unbeaten versus Phil's last 2 years. So I already know all those numbers. The fact that they're 6-0 the last 2 years, and it's all about their pitching really more than their offense. But that's the key. It's making it conversational and not making it sort of scripted. That's I always do, like with my opens. I always try to. I don't think I was this way when I was younger. I would have it all scripted out when I was younger, but now I've done so many of them that I don't even like to see what the shots are before I go on. The beauty shots before I go on camera, because I want it to be spontaneous and kind of easy flowing at that point.
And one of my friends on here who's helped me with my podcast, his name is Jamie. He's a Philly sports guy. He paints his face up. You probably would know him around town at the Eagle games. And he's the one that helped me with StreamYard. And he gave me some advice too, like, Chris, it's good to write your questions and all that down, but you have to learn the ad-lib as well. And he's actually been a big help in my development on my podcast.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I mean, believe me, there's so many different ways to do it. But I do think going all natural with some of with the conversations, that is the way to do it. It just makes it kind of flow more conversational and fun. So,
and I've been a big fan of yours too, doing the Phillies games. Obviously, you did the Mets radio for a couple years, and then you've been with the NFL on CBS since 2014, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's kind of cool. I mean, I have this. I get a chance to sort of dabble in doing football. I don't do as much football as I used to, but with CBS, I'm part of the 7th crew, which, people always say, oh, it's a shame you don't have you're not higher on the list. And I said, well, it isn't really, because then it doesn't really affect my baseball. I can do a full baseball season. I do anywhere between 160 and 170 baseball games a year.
Wow.
So I don't like to leave, but I do get a chance to leave, like I did the last couple weekends doing the Browns games, and then eventually I'll do the opening weekend of the NFL. But if the Phillies are in the race, then that'll be it for the baseball season.
Okay.
But it's great. I mean, I'm a radio guy who's doing TV, but I really have enjoyed doing television. I love doing it for baseball, and I've really grown into liking it a lot for the National Football League. And I've been really fortunate, Chris, because I've had some great partners. I started on the NFL with CBS with Adam Archuleta, who's become a very close friend, and then went to Steve Berline and Steve Tasker, and then eventually Jay Feely. and now it's Tiki Barber. So it's been pretty cool to kind of get to know these guys. And then for the Browns, I had the pleasure of working with Joe Thomas, the former offensive lineman who will be in the Hall of Fame at some point, and then Andrew Hawkins this past weekend. I just think it's so neat to kind of get to know these guys and just to get a feel for all their personalities.
And I was going to say, I tuned into that game Sunday, and I didn't realize you were doing their preseason games. I'm like, hey, I know that guy's voice. And then sure enough, I'm like, hey, that's Tom McCarthy, who's going to be my guest on this week and with the Phillies. And I think you're as good with football as you are with
well, I appreciate
baseball.
that. I do feel, and I tell kids this all the time. I tell my sons this. I have one who's in the business and one who's still a professional ball player. And I think eventually will find his way into this. I said it's important to do all the sports because, well, first of all, you don't know where your foundation piece will be. If you have a joy for baseball, well, then you find that. If you have a joy for football, you find that. But I always think that doing the other sports makes you a better broadcaster for whatever sport you're doing. So when I do football, I feel like it helps me with baseball and basketball and vice versa. So I'm really fortunate that the Phillies, on my days where I'm off, allow me to do these other sports. And I've really been lucky to get some really good assignments. And I enjoyed doing those Browns games. I had never done preseason football. I wanted to try it. I just wanted to see what it was like. And I really enjoyed it. And they were a good group to work with. They really were.
And that's one stadium I'd like to go to. And I know Cleveland, they love their Browns as much as Buffalo, as much as Buffalo loves the Bills, and Philly loves the Eagle. Fans are very passionate, and I really hope they have a good year this year.
Have you been to Buffalo? Have you seen games in Buffalo?
Yeah, I've been to about 28 games. So
that's a cool place. That's kind of like that's one of my favorite places to go is Buffalo. And Cleveland. I think it would be great if they had a team that was even better than last year, because that city, they love their Browns. I mean, they do. I mean, they love their Indians. They love the Cavs, particularly when LeBron was there.
Yeah.
But man, they love their Browns, and it's been a long time. I mean, obviously they've never gone to the Super Bowl, so it's just a chance to do that would be pretty special for that city.
Okay. Are you still okay for time? I was just going to ask you some questions.
Yeah. Fire away.
Okay, no problem. And speaking of Cleveland, one of my social media friends is Bess McLeod, whose late husband Fred did the Cavaliers games for many years, and Pistons and Taggers on Pass. And he's one of the. I wish I had a chance to interview him on my podcast, like yourself, because he's one of the best in the business. Fred McLeod.
Yeah, I mean that's the. There are a lot of guys and gals out there. That sometimes, like, let's say I'm in Philadelphia and I don't get a chance to hear Dave Sims all the time, who's a good friend. But, with the baseball package, you try to. And it's the same with basketball. Kevin Calabro is back in the NBA. And if you get a chance to listen to him, it's unbelievable. But on the East Coast, we don't always get a chance to hear guys on the West Coast. And the same with the Central time zone, too. So that's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of these cities have had some really, really sweet people that they've been able to listen to over the years.
Definitely. Okay, my first question, can you just tell my audience just a little bit about yourself? And I guess you already answered the other part when you wanted to pursue a career in sports as a play-by-play announcer.
Yeah, so I went to college. I went to college to just play baseball, and I wasn't good enough, as it turned out. I thought I was, but I wasn't good enough. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So once I stopped playing baseball, I was actually going to transfer to another school to play. Decided not to do it. I started becoming a sports writer, and I thought that was kind of neat, is to write. So I covered, local sports and covered the Phillies and college sports for the Trenton Times as a writer for 5 years. And during that time, somebody said, "Hey, man, you got a good voice. You should think about doing this for a living." And I was like, all right. And that's basically how I started. I started doing my own college's football games while I was still in school for the commercial station. So I got $100 a game to do these games. And that I thought, man, I can live on this. So that's basically how I started and just kind of worked my way from there. The real key for me was we got a minor league baseball team in Trenton in 1994. And I got the job as their PR guy, their community relations director, and their radio broadcaster. And that is really what started it for me. From there, I wound up going to Princeton to do football, basketball while still being in the minors. Eventually went to Rutgers football. Eventually went to St. Joseph's basketball. And then in 2000, I was going to give up the broadcasting and just run a minor league baseball team, and was really close, was, seconds away from doing that. And I decided I didn't really want to do it. I wanted to keep broadcasting. So, I thanked my owners at the Thunder who wanted me to go run another team. I said, I need to pursue this a little bit more. And I did. And then a year later, I got hired by the Phillies. And I was really lucky. I was there for 5 years, went to the Mets for 2. And then in the middle of my Mets contract, was asked to come back to do TV in Philadelphia. And I've been there ever since.
Okay. The other one, this is the next question you already answered where you attend school. Did you have any mentor or mentors when you were first starting out, Tom, in the industry?
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of people that helped me. I think that my mentors in the beginning were writers from the Trenton Times. Bus Sate, who's in the Hall of Fame. Harvey Yavner, who's in the College Hall of Fame. People like that. Tony Persicilli, who was a local writer in Trenton, New Jersey. And then from a broadcasting standpoint, they probably don't even remember this, but I would lean on guys like Mike Francesa, who was a talk show host in New York City. And I'm sure he doesn't even remember it. Or Chris Russo, who was a talk show host. I would reach out to anybody. I have one guy, Chris, who I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. His name is Rich Jablonski. And he was the play-by-play voice of the Charleston Rainbows. And I was writing at the time and doing a minor league report, and I was starting to get into broadcasting. And I told him I was coming down to write a story on a player by the name of Dave Leback, who was a college player from our area, played for the Padres. And I asked, can I sit in and watch how you broadcast a game? He said, yeah. So I got down there, and he let me actually broadcast a game without ever having broadcast baseball before. And I used that tape to get my first job as a minor league broadcaster. So guys like that were huge. And then as I was in the business a little bit more, my partner, Andy Freed, we kind of mentored each other because we were together for so long. But then others I would lean on once I got to the big leagues. Vin Scully, I leaned on a lot. Chris Wheeler, I leaned on a lot. HK, I leaned on a lot. Gary Cohen, I leaned on an awful lot. Those guys to me were people that I would just kind of say, hey man, I need some help on this. Mike Breen is somebody that if I feel off on my basketball play-by-play, I go to a Mike Breen game. And then I'm like, okay, that's how I'm going to do it. So
Mike Breen's one of the best.
He's one of the best people too, Chris. One of the best people too.
And that's the one thing about this industry, Tom, since I've been doing this over a year now, is all my guests on here, doesn't matter who it is, Dan Shawman or yourself, Jerry Howarth, Ken Daniels from the Red Wings. Everyone has been really great with me.
Good, man.
And they've treated me all like I'm one of theirs. That's another reason I want to get into this industry, because I see how many good people there are in this industry. And it's not just the teams that they work or are employed for, it's how they talk to people as well.
Yeah, and that's great. And I tell people all the time, and I tell my kids this, and I tell kids that I talk to, treat people not only the way you want to be treated, but treat people the way you think that they should be treated. Because that's the way, I mean, you'll find, and I think you already have by mentioning some of the folks that you mentioned, we can't do this by ourselves. I mean, we need everybody around us. I need my camera operators. I need my producer, Jeff Halleckman. I need my director, Nick Marquetta. I need my NBC, my CBS producer and Deb Bulak and Seller Shy. I can't do it without them. So you got to make sure that they're feeling good about being around you all the time too.
And being with Rogers TV, the camera operator for hockey games here in this Guelph area where I live, which is near Toronto, you see how much work it is to set up a broadcast and tear down one. And every aspect of it, the producers are so important. The producer to me is like a quarterback in football. You have to be good at all aspects of the job, and you have to deal with things that come up on the fly as well.
Absolutely. And, that's, people always ask me, what do you like better, radio or TV? I said, well, they're different. I said, radio, I'm kind of the guy in charge. And TV, I'm just along for the ride. And I like that. I like the teamwork aspect of it to try to, make sure that the product is done properly.
Definitely. Okay. Next question. Are you still okay for time?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. I always check with my guests. That's the one thing I've learned too. Oh, one of the guys I did have on, Chuck Swirsky, one of the
Oh, he's the
nicest
best.
guys. One
He's
of the
got a
nicest
haircut like
guys.
me.
Yes, and he had his Expos hat on too. He's one of the nicest guys too, and I hope one day I can talk to him again. He's a really great
He's
guy.
great. He's a great
Definitely,
guy. Great guy.
definitely. Okay. My next question for you, Tom, is what was your first stint like with the Phillies, like 2001 to 05, and calling out games on radio on that side, and working alongside with Chris Wheeler, I guess, as well,
Yeah.
and Larry
So
Anderson.
I got a chance to work with Harry, Chris, Andy Musser. It was incredible. Scott Graham. It was incredible. Yeah, I would have stayed in Philadelphia. Even I wouldn't have gone to New York. It's just that the Mets opportunity, and I grew up a Mets fan, but the Mets opportunity was just more innings, more play by play. So I had been doing a couple of innings of play by play with the Phillies each game. But just to watch those guys operate, to kind of lean on their knowledge, keep an open mind, be in the same room with them, travel with them, have dinner with them. It was a treat. And it was, I mean, we were close to getting to the postseason a couple times. Larry Boa had us close. We had Jim Thome at the time, Kevin Millwood, people like that. It was a pretty good time to watch the Phillies develop. And then, you saw Jimmy Rollins coming and Chase Utley coming and Pat Burrell coming.
Yeah.
So that was kind of neat to be with those guys. Those guys, Wheels, I still talk to Wheels at least twice a week, and he's retired now, but he's still a great resource for me. Just like Harry was, just like Andy Musser was.
I was gonna say, were you a little bit nervous when you first started doing the radio play-by-play for the Phillies, like your first game? Do you remember your first game you called for the Phillies on radio,
I
and which
remember it
stadium?
was I called a Scott Rowland home run, and Harry was next to me, and I looked over after I called, and Harry just went like that, and it was really cool. I don't, it's funny, Chris. I could be lying because of my memory, but I don't generally get nervous
Okay.
doing games. But I'm sure I was at that time. I can't remember if I was. I know I wanted to do a solid job. I wanted to be able to provide for my family, and I wanted to do it for a long time. So there probably was nerves. Yeah, I mean, it was probably sort of nervous energy, anticipation, adrenaline, all those things that you get used to after a while. But probably back then, I probably felt it more than I remember.
Okay. The next question I was going to ask you is, how did you end up coming about the New York Mets play-by-play job?
It's a great
for
question.
years?
Back in the early 2000s, Gary Cohen had asked me if I had interest in coming up to New York to be his partner because they had an opening. But he wasn't sure what was going to happen. As it turned out, Howie Rose got the job, which Howie Rose should have gotten the job. And then 2 years later, SNY was developing. So the Mets were looking for somebody to replace Gary. And Howie called me and said, I would love for you to apply for this job. And I was very content in Philadelphia. I mean, I didn't know if there would be any more responsibility down the road, but I was comfortable with what I was doing. But I applied for it and I got it. And I wouldn't have been able to get it without Howie, without Mark Chernoff from WFAN, Eric Spitz from WFAN. And it was a pretty cool assignment. I loved being Howie's partner. I loved working with Ed Coleman and Chris Majkowski. They taught me so much. I was a better broadcaster by the time I left. I just was. I just was better, and I would not have been as good if I had not gone there because they taught me an awful lot.
And I was going to say also getting your reps
Yep.
was important
Yep.
in your time there. And
Yeah,
also
because I was doing 142 games in the minor leagues, but for 2 years wasn't really doing much play-by-play. I was just doing the pre and post game shows. So, with the Phillies. So that, I still felt like I was getting reps because I would do it on my own, but it wasn't the same.
I was going to say reps are important no matter if you're doing a podcast or
No doubt.
you're doing is play-by-play. And one thing I've also learned too is building contacts up as well.
Yep, it is true. I mean, you have to network. It's not being political. It's just networking. It's just keeping your relationships afloat.
definitely building a rapport too. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about as well. And then my next question I wanted to ask you, I originally asked Bob Sochi, the voice of the Patriots, who's another great guy, by the way. I could
Another
talk
great
to him
guy.
for hours. When I talked to him about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, I asked him what was it like replacing Gil Santos, and Bob was nice enough to correct me and just said it's more like following in the footsteps, because he had to follow in the footsteps of a legend like Gil Santos, who did the
Yep.
Patriots play-by-play for 36 years, I believe. And that's how I worded this question. What is it like following in the footsteps of the late, great Harry Kalas?
Well, I mean, when I came back to Philadelphia, the thought was I was coming back to replace Harry when he retired, whenever that was. It could have been 10 years down the road. It was unfortunate that a year after I came back, he had passed away. I never felt pressure following Harry because I was so different, and I knew that, and he knew that, and he would tell me that you got to be yourself. Don't worry about trying to be me. And Gary Matthews, the Sarge, who was one of my closest friends, was one of my partners, just said, "Hey, somebody had to follow Willie Mays," and Gary Maddox was the guy that pretty much followed Willie Mays and Bobby Bonds and me. Somebody has to do it. So just do it and just be yourself. And that's what I've tried to do. Chris, I have tried not to be anybody else. And I know that it's a totally different style. But this will be, I'm finishing up my 19th year with the Phillies. Been a long time. And it's my 14th year back. So, there's still people, and believe me, I don't blame them, because Harry made the big call better than anybody. I can't make the call the way Harry does, like the big home run call, the big, show topper. But there's still people I think that would love to have him call games, but he never made me feel that way. He made me feel like I was just part of the family. And that's what I always took.
And that's what I love about this industry, from talking to everybody on here about that. And that makes you want to improve all the time and do a even better job. And it just makes you feel a part of the team.
Well, that's exactly it. And if we all sounded the same, it just wouldn't be it wouldn't be right. So you do the best you can with the ability that God has given you and that you've worked on. Be prepared, be on time, build relationships, make it, just make everybody feel like they're part of the family. That's what we do. And you just call the game. Just call the game.
Okay. And then my next question I wanted to ask you, what is it like calling Phillies games in the Philadelphia market? Because it's one of the best sports markets in North America. And what's to me, the other part of the question is, what is the biggest difference from calling games on TV from radio, or should I say radio to TV?
Yes, you've done both. The Philly market is unbelievable. I mean, the passion of the fan base is just incredible. I love every bit of it. Every bit of it. Their expectations are high, their emotions are high, their energy level's high, and that I'm thankful for, because it lifts me up. It kind of lifts you up and makes it a better broadcast. So that I love. I love everything about that. The difference between radio and TV is, in some ways, radio, as the play-by-play guy, you're in control. It's your show. TV, it's really the analyst show. Like I let John Kruk and Ruben Amaro and Mike Schmidt and Jimmy Rollins and Ben Davis, I kind of just feed off them. But you also have all of these other folks, your camera operators, your producer, your director. It's their show too. And you just try to kind of facilitate it. For the first 3 or 4 years, and there's probably even times now, I was doing radio on TV. I was basically calling the game like I was on radio, and that takes time to break. I think I'm better at it, or I was better at it doing football and basketball than baseball, because I was so used to doing radio. So the biggest difference is that when you're on radio, it's basically your show, and you're responsible for everything. On TV, you get a chance to consume all the responsibilities of everybody else, and that teamwork is pretty cool to have.
I was going to say, do you find it's a little more, with radio, you have more time to tell stories than television?
Sometimes you do because you have control over when the drop-ins are, and there's no shots that your director's looking for. People always ask us about the shots of the stadium, the shots of the food. Why do we show so much of that? Well, it's all part of telling the story of the franchise. But you kind of feed off of what the director and the producer are doing, whereas on radio, you're kind of controlling that. But I like that part of it. I like being spontaneous. I like that part of it. I've learned to love both mediums for their differences.
And that's what everybody here has been telling me too. Be yourself and be natural. Don't try to be somebody that you're not.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. And sometimes it's hard. But I think that at the end of the day, it's the only way to do it. Because honestly, Chris, if you were somebody else, you can't do that 24/7. You just can't. There'll be chinks, there'll be chinks in your armor. There'll be flaws. And you just, the more natural you are, the better it is.
And if you're not, the audiences will tend to find out.
Yeah, I think the audience will find out. I do. I really do.
Okay. Next question for you, Tom. What are your overall thoughts on the 2021 Phillies so far? And what do you feel the Phillies need to address in the off season? If that might be a little too early to ask.
No, I think that we're inconsistent, but we're good. We're really good, and we're really fun. When we're not, it's a struggle offensively. I think we've started to address some of the things already. Bringing in Kyle Gibson to add to this rotation is huge. I still think we probably need another starting pitcher. They're hard to find. I do think we probably need a couple more bullpen pieces. I would love one more hitter, like one more really consistent, solid hitter. Not necessarily a 30 home run guy, but somebody who can just get on base, can be disruptive, can be consistent at the top of the order. And, that I think would help us it would go a long way in 2022. I still think that, we've got a lot of really good baseball to play this year, and I'm excited about the month of September. But I do think we have to, I think the last 16 games we're hitting under 200. Can't do that. Not when the Braves are playing the way they're playing, because we're pitching well. We're just not hitting well right now.
I was going to say, it's funny with Atlanta right now. They were on a hot streak until they faced the Yankees. Atlanta's 500 at home, but they're like 10 or 11 games above 500 on the road.
Strange.
And the Phillies at home are solid, 36 and 26, but they've 27 and 36 on the road. It's just funny how both teams have played better at one area than the other.
Yeah, it is strange. I can't even I can put my finger on the Philly. You always play better at home. The fact that the Braves haven't is it's very strange. Now, part of that could be, they've made a lot of changes, and maybe those changes have been when they've had more road games. They're still a really tough team. Offensively, I like them a lot. I think that, the 4.5 game deficit the Phillies have right now, they've got to do some stuff the next couple of days. So they have the game on Wednesday against the Rays and the game on Thursday against the Diamondbacks while the Braves are off. So they can make up a full game if they win a couple of ball games on Wednesday and Thursday.
And the Yankees have helped out. I think they've beaten Atlanta the last 2 games too. And last
they have, and now the Braves will have 2 days off. So, we were thankful from a Phillies standpoint. The only problem is that we're playing the Rays, who probably are a little bit better than the Yankees are, even though the Yankees are red hot.
Definitely. I was going to say my next question. I forgot to write this one down, but I'll ask you before I just get to a couple NFL questions for you, and I'll let you go, Tom. Obviously, Citizens Bank Park is probably your favorite place to do a baseball game for. Besides Philadelphia, what other cities or a couple other stadiums that you really enjoy calling the games from?
Well, I love Wrigley and Fenway. You can't take those away from me. I love them. I wish old Yankee Stadium was still there because the new Yankee Stadium's not as exciting. To me, it isn't. But I love those two. New ballparks. Love San Francisco. I think it's a great view. It's great energy. And I love Pittsburgh and PNC Park. I think that those two are beautiful places. I do love Citizens Bank Park. It's not objective, I know, but it is still my favorite place to call a game. But I like the older ones better than some of the newer ones.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to go to Old Tiger Stadium, and I used to.
That was a cool place.
Oh yeah,
I was a little hungover the time I was there, so I don't really remember all of it, but it was a good place. Dave Winfield played first base for the Angels the day I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Angels. So that would be in the early 80s, I believe.
Yeah, it might have
No,
been late
late 80s.
80s.
Yeah, late 80s.
I was out of college, so it was probably late 80s, early 90s.
Wow, hard to believe. I was gonna say, and their broadcasting booths, you were right on the field basically.
Yeah, you were.
You had to pay attention in that
Yeah,
booth
you
because a
did. You
lot
had a
of foul
glove.
balls.
That's why Ernie had a glove all the time.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, and I just got a couple quick NFL questions for you, Tom. Are you still okay for 5 more minutes?
I've probably have that. Yeah, I probably have
Oh,
5.
okay, no problem. We'll get to this one. Thoughts on the 2021 Buffalo Bills and giving Josh Allen that big extension? And do you think the Bills are a Super Bowl contender? And quick thoughts on the 2021 Philadelphia Eagles so far.
Well, I do think that the Bills are a Super Bowl contender. I do like a lot of what I like a lot of their team. I love their head coach. I love their GM. And I do love Josh Allen. I think I don't think there's anything wrong in this day and age for him to get that contract because I don't think that they're going to go anywhere unless he's part of it. I think that they're a real contender. Now, I do think that the conference is good. I mean, obviously Kansas City is still really good. I think the Browns are going to be really good. But I do think the Bills are a team to be reckoned with. I'm excited for them. I'm excited for their year. I think some of it's going to depend on their running game, and if they can establish that as being a focal point. But I think they've solved the quarterback issue because it's been an issue for them over the last 10 years or so, if not longer. And as far as the Eagles are concerned, I think they're a work in progress. I will say Devontae Smith is really good. He made a couple of moves the other day that were phenomenal. I think Jalen Hurts is getting better. I don't know if this is the year for them, but I do think that they're going to improve as the year goes on. And I still think that their division's wide open. I don't think anybody, I mean, it depends on Dak's health with the Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott's health. I don't think the Giants are a team that runs away with anything. I don't think the Redskins are a team that runs away with anything. So I think the Eagles are in a really good division for their development to possibly do something as the year goes on.
I was gonna say, and Hurts, I know he's in his second year, but he's also still kind of a rookie because he didn't really play that much last year. And it's just gonna be interesting to see how the first months of the season goes,
They
especially
got a
with
tough first. Their first 4 or 5 games, Chris. They got a pretty tough schedule. I mean, they could be 1-3, 1-4. I mean, it's a tough start, but I think it's a good start for a young quarterback to kind of get acclimated to things.
and one thing I know as an Eagles fan, I like Carson Wentz, but I wonder, do you think he'll do well with Indianapolis under Frank Wright?
I do, as long as he's healthy.
Okay.
I think the system is really good for him. I think the feeling of confidence from head coach to player is good for him. He's a nice guy. I hope that he has health. I think that's the biggest thing, Chris. He's got to be healthy. If he's not, I mean, obviously the foot was an issue in preseason. Nobody really plays in preseason, so he hasn't really hurt himself from that standpoint. But I do think that if he doesn't stay healthy, you can have the same issues that you had in Philadelphia.
Okay. And I'm just going to wrap this up, but maybe in the future again, Tom, maybe after the Philly season and the NFL season, maybe I can have you come back on again and talk a little more
It'd be
sports
great.
as well.
It'd be great.
Okay.
Good luck with everything, Chris, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask you a quick last question. Any advice for anyone, not just myself, looking to pursue a career in radio, television, and where can my audience find you again on social media?
Well, so you can find me T-Mac Phils on Twitter. I think that's my Instagram account too.
Okay.
I try to answer when I can. I'm not on it as often as as most other people are, but I do try to answer whenever I can. And my advice to anybody is to do it. To do what you're doing now. Get the headset on. Get the microphone in front of you. Start. If you're young, if you're in high school, speech classes. I always tell guys, speech classes help you with your grammar and help you be in front of an audience. And that's the key, is to be comfortable in front of any audience. And that audience is an audience of 1, or it's an audience of 1,000 or 100,000. So speech classes, and don't worry as much about finding a school that is a quote unquote big time school. If you don't want to do that, find a school where you can get opportunities. That is the key if you're looking for a college.
Okay. Again, Tom, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on live with CDP. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'd love to have you back as a guest sometime again in the future and talk Phillies baseball and some more NFL.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Be good, buddy.
You too. Thanks, Tom. Have a good day. Bye. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed my podcast today with Tom McCarthy, the longtime TV voice of the Philadelphia Phillies, and also now NFL on CBS play-by-play announcer as well. I really appreciate Tom coming on today. He's one of the best in the business. He's great with baseball, obviously with the Phillies, and also with the NFL on CBS. And he also does some college basketball as well for Westwood One as well. And the one thing I forgot to ask Tom if he's ever called any hockey games, but I really appreciate Tom coming on again today. And what I'm going to do right now before I go, guys, I'm just going to show you a clip of some of Tom's best play-by-play calls from 2018, and then we'll wrap up my podcast for today.
They dump it off underneath to Virgil Green, and he breaks a couple of tackles inside the 15-yard line. On second down, Rivers to the end zone, and it's caught. Touchdown, Chargers, Mike Williams.
Had a chance to sit in the same location for more than a few years as Philip Rivers has, so no.
Well, here's Gordon into the open field. Touchdown, Los Angeles. A 20-yard run for Melvin Gordon. His first rushing touchdown of the season. Out of the gun. Pressure's coming. He steps up and he'll go. And he's tripped up at the 6-yard line. A dive makes the tackle. Everybody's up to the line of scrimmage. A little bit of movement on the right side. The handoff goes to Ivory, and he's into the end zone. Touchdown, Bills. The first touchdown of the year for Buffalo. They dump it off to Ivory. And Ivory makes a few men miss. And then another one inside the 25. And now the 10. And out of bounds inside the 5-yard line. They're going to mark him inside the 3. From the 3, that's Clay in motion for the Bills. Allen. To the back down, Buffalo. Well, that's the exact play that we watched over and over again. On first down for the 36. Quick toss to Thomas. Trying to rely on his athleticism. And he's got a first down and inside Denver territory. 31 yards. It's first down from the 33. Off the play fake. Watson looking to throw. Middle of the field. Thomas again. Watson looking to throw. Back of the end zone. Touchdown, Houston. Jordan Thomas with his third touchdown in 2 weeks.
Anyways, guys, that's just a little bit of Tom's work on the NFL and CBS since he's been doing that since 2014. Anyways, again, I just want to say thank you so much for Tom coming on today because I know he's got another game called tonight for the Phillies against the Tampa Bay Rays at 7:05 at Citizens Bank Park tonight. The Phillies are right now 63 and 62 in the National League East. 4.5 behind Atlanta and 5 out of a wild card. So the Phillies have 37 games left in the season, and they have some ground to gain on Atlanta in the wild card as well. So and then they got a 4-game home series against the Arizona Diamondbacks this weekend at Citizens Bank Park as well. And also, as Tom mentioned on my podcast, he's calling all the Cleveland Browns preseason games in Cleveland for them. And the Browns have another preseason game this weekend to wrap up the preseason game as well. So anyways, I just want to say thank you to everyone who watched this podcast live on my YouTube channel, on Twitter, and on Twitch live streaming. I am back on Facebook, and eventually at some point I will start doing my live broadcast back on Facebook. I had to create a new account. Long story about that. My old one is been deleted. So, but I appreciate everybody coming on here. And also just to let you know, my Live with CDP podcast, the audio version is always on Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify, Castbox. It's also on LinkedIn as well. And I will download the audio of this podcast after. So, and I really appreciate everybody watching on here as well. And also, guys, you can also follow me now on TikTok at Live with CDP, at Live with CDP on TikTok. And I am back on Facebook under my name, Chris Pame, if you'd like to friend me there. But I'm on Twitter a lot as well. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to say thank you again for watching. And also just to let you know, I have a website with Live with CDP coming soon. So stay tuned for that. And also, guys, before I go, Live with CDP merchandise podcast shirts are $15. I got coffee mugs now for $15, and my new podcast hats are $18. Shipping is extra if you're out of Guelph and out of the country as well. And everyone who's bought one of my podcast shirts, mugs, or hats, thank you so much again. And my next Live with CDP podcast will be this Friday at 6 o'clock with guest Gary Agudo, who's the owner of Everything Fitness in Guelph on Grange Road. I'm just going to confirm with him tonight that he can still come on around 6 o'clock Friday night. He's going to talk to me about his business, his gym, and also nutrition and fitness, and a little bit about himself as well. And Gary has his own podcast in Guelph called The Balance 519. So please, if you check out podcasts on Apple, Google, etc., check out his podcast, The Balance 519. He does a really good job with his podcast as well. So anyways, guys, I think I'm going to call it a show. I need to go get some sleep. And like I said, I really enjoyed my podcast today. And hopefully you guys can tune into my next podcast this Friday night at 6 o'clock as well. And you guys now can follow me back again on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also if you'd like to subscribe and hit like to my YouTube channel where my previous podcasts are as well. And also, guys, CFL game Thursday, the Argos in Edmonton postponed due to the Elks having some players test positive for COVID. I'm not sure when they're going to reschedule that game. But anyways, guys, like I said, thank you, everybody, again, for coming on today for Live with CDP. And again, thank you to my special guest, Tom McCarthy, the longtime TV voice of the Phillies and the NFL on CBS. All right, guys, I hope you all have a great day. And we'll see you Friday night at 6 o'clock for Live with CDP. Have a great day. Thank you, guys.